We're going to have people bouncing in and out throughout the entire talk. We also have people in other buildings watching the stream live, which you can actually do by clicking the YouTube button in the top corner. If you're in a different building, you can actually watch the stream live from there. So I am bringing Doug up on stage right now, and bear with me. This is the first speaker of the day, so all kinds of fun things are going to go wrong. Thank you, Doug, for being the guinea pig. And this is a good time just to remind everyone that this is the first time that we have done this entire conference online. There is indefinitely going to be quirks and glitches and things that are going to go wrong. Bear with us, but also feedback welcome. I'm really excited to see what everyone thinks about this different format. It is 100% lock that we're going to be doing the conference next year, 2021 as well. There's zero chance that hundreds and hundreds of people are going to have any interest in getting together in one physical space in 2021. That's just the reality that we're dealing with these days. So 2021 will definitely be online as well. And without further ado, I'm really looking forward to going deep with Doug Song, founder and CEO of Duo Security. Doug, we're going to do a quick mic check with you. Of all the skateboards you have in your collection, which one is most sacred to you?
Sacred? No, there are no sacred skateboards. Skateboards are meant to be ridden, but
fair enough.
Yep. Which
one would you be most sad if it broke?
Oh, yeah, the one I'm currently riding, I guess.
Okay.
Which is my Jeff Grosso pool deck. Anyway, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So ask questions throughout the entire thing. Audience members, please. I'm going to be grilling Doug and trying to pull out the stories that have never been told before, hopefully. And we're going to start, Doug, by taking you back to college. And
oh no, please don't.
We're going to go back to college, and you made some fun memories back in college with your computer. Why don't you tell us about that and tell us how you got caught?
Oh, way to start, Casey. So yeah, I came to school in Michigan in '93, and came to Michigan actually from the East Coast where I grew up, not knowing anything about the Midwest. All I knew was that Michigan had a very large computer network. And I knew that because I'd kind of poked around a bit of that earlier. And so when I got there, I did explore a bunch of aspects of system security, and anyway, ended up working for the university for 4 years as a result. So, but yeah, it was a good learning experience for me, and I was very fortunate actually. There was a system administrator, this fellow Paul Anderson. He is a deaf programmer who kind of took me under wing. And afforded me my first job actually doing security. It's a legitimate enterprise. So that's how I got my start in all this. But yeah, if it hadn't been for that, I would not have had a job, wouldn't have paid my way through school, or had any sort of commercial experience doing this stuff. I probably just would have gotten into more trouble. Okay,
well, hold on. I need to drill a little bit deeper into this trouble. So you actually hacked some networks, is that right?
This is something like that, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Neither confirm nor deny.
All right. So moving forward, Ann Arbor, back in the early days of Duo Security. Take us back to Tech Brewery. And first of all, explain to the audience who aren't clear, what is Tech Brewery? And talk about the original idea for Duo and what problem you were setting out to solve.
Yeah. So my first job in college was basically working for the university, doing that, other than working at the local vegetarian restaurant cooking. And straight after college, I had spun out or I joined a firm that was actually doing security consulting for banks and hospitals and so forth. But we sort of spun out a product from that work because we realized that all the products that we were reselling were really problematic in that, they were, not a great margin for us, right? Sort of as a reseller, the margins tend to be, razor thin. But also it was complicated and confusing for customers. And so anyway, by the time that we did Duo, which was actually several companies later, and after that first consulting company, I went off to go and start our first venture-backed company called Arbor Networks. After that one, we had, I'd left to go join an internet TV company called Zatu. And then after that, I'd joined another company called Barracuda, neither of which I'd founded. But by the time we started Duo, it was really with the intent to go and try to make security easy and effective for everybody. That, I think starting around 2006, we really started to see the rise of all these targeted attacks against users. And so down in Brazil, there were these Brazilian banking Trojans that people were writing malware that was specifically targeting online banking and going after, end users instead of, the banks directly. Turns out that those end users are way more vulnerable and sort of soft and squishier than the banks are. And so they're very, very effective at that. And no one is really figuring out how to help defend against those kind of attacks in a meaningful way. And so we started Duo with the intent that we would try to make that problem something that we could solve, because we saw a sea change coming of attackers starting to go after users instead of network systems or applications.
Cool. So on day one, this is what you set out to do. What did the early team look like for Duo?
Yeah, so the team was technically, well, okay, so day one depends on where you sort of draw that line. I left Barracuda. I was chief architect there, helping to prepare them to IPO. And, I just seen that the problem was getting much worse. It was becoming untenable, right? You saw this, a lot of small businesses actually being affected in ways that previously maybe only saw the big banks and hospitals and governments and so forth be breached. And so really the intention was to go and pull together a team to go and figure out how to solve for those kind of needs for smaller businesses. And it was kind of a ragtag ensemble, right, of friends and folks that I tried to pull into this thing early. Unlike most, I don't know what most folks' founding journeys are, but I didn't have a clear co-founder at the start. I was trying to pull together a number of friends who actually many of whom later end up joining Duo. But in those early days, there were a lot of folks who were really trying to help and put together something. I was trying to figure out if any of them would be willing to make the jump with me, right, to go and do it. But it was only really Jono, who was my co-founder and CTO, but previously my student intern at Arbor Networks, that first venture-backed company we did, who actually did leave to go and do this with me. He put his PhD on hiatus halfway through, and I had to promise his professor, his advisor, that I would get him done as a PhD in order to do that. And so that's what we did. And so that early team was, again, Jono was my student intern at Arbor, who became my co-founder. I did pull another friend, Adam Goodman, who had followed me from Zatu, that internet TV company, to Barracuda, and then finally to Duo. So he joined a bit after John and I had actually founded the company. It was December 23rd, I think, that we incorporated in Delaware as a C Corp. And then, the next two people after that, of that early team in that first year, were an old friend, Carl Anderson, this old Portland punk and mutant bike gang leader. I never met him actually in person. I only known him online and through swapping zines, these homemade sort of magazines. Actually, I have one of those here. Anyway, so yeah, he still makes these zines. They're like these little kind of pamphlets on phone hacking and all kinds of stuff. So I never met him in person, but we hired him, and then Tom Haynes, another intern from my Zatu days, Inter TV company, and he was our designer. So it's basically three sort of hackers and a designer, and we kind of kept that ratio ever since. This Duo today, even at almost 800 people or over 800 people, is one designer for every 5 developers. And so so that's what we've done like in day one, and it's kind of just scaled up from there.
And so was nobody taking salaries day one, including you? Like how were you funding all this?
Yeah, no, we were not taking salaries. The way we kind of set up was, Adam had ended up deferring any payment. Jono could, because Jono could float longer on a ramen budget because he was a student. He was a PhD student. He was used to that. In fact, I don't think he owned a proper pair of pants or actually shoes. He was always in flip-flops until much later in the company. I didn't have an exit yet, so I had been part of 2 prior startups, but neither had exited. And so, I didn't really have a big nest egg or anything. what I did have was a wife who was pregnant with our second child, and a little bit of savings and some house money we're gonna draw down on. And so we basically bootstrapped for the first year and made it work. Between myself and John, we each, I think, put in about $10,000 each, and got all the state filings out of the way, kind of got the office set up. The office was actually just the Tech Brewery was a co-working space in the remnants of the old Zatu office, which had shrunk down. That's one of the reasons I left Zatu was it was going through a major downsizing, and I had to lay off 80% of the people I'd hired. Outplaced every one of them, but nevertheless, turned the rest of the building then into a co-working space, as you do. And for $50 a month, we could each rent a seat at a desk in that building, and that's how we got the company started. But yeah, it was just kind of scrapping it together. It didn't look very much like a company.
So what did you spend the first year doing? Were you just heads down building product, or were you selling as well?
Yeah, we were trying to figure out what it was we built. So the general problem statement of trying to make security easy and effective for everybody and so forth was something we had ambitions around, but we didn't actually know what the product would be or what technology we'd use to solve it. What we ended up doing within our first 30 days is actually drove Jono out to New York City with me, which is a bit strange. We could have afforded a flight, but I was trying to share with him a lesson, I guess. I'm about 10 years older than Jono on being frugal, right? Kind of setting the right kind of tone from the start. So we drove out to Brooklyn, stayed with my friend Jenny in her apartment. I think I slept on the floor. I gave Jono the couch, and the next morning we were in the cafeteria of Goldman Sachs, actually meeting with an old customer of mine, Byron Colley, who was the former head of global risk, and he also ran the FSISAC, the financial kind of a security industry kind of consortium for the banks, as well as Gary Owen, who was at Citibank. But we were there basically, just asking, like, what are the problems you're seeing today that you think are going to hit everyone else in the next 5-10 years? And so it was basically customer discovery, right? We were just trying to figure out what we'd actually build and for whom. Well, actually, it's to say we knew for whom. We knew it would be smaller companies that were underserved, right, by the existing security industry. But we're trying to figure out what problems are they like to see and what should we be getting ahead of. And they both answered, almost in unison, like account takeover. All of our people are being targeted, and these attacks are really hard to defend against because people, again, are soft and squishy, and I can't just put a firewall right between them. And so that's what we ended up doing in our first year, trying to figure out, test that hypothesis, right? So based on what they had told us, within the next 30 days, we went to a friend who had a reselling business. It was actually the old reselling business that I was part of, right? Back in straight out of college. We had sold off that consulting business as we went to go build product. And this fellow who bought that consulting business, Steve Fuller, had built it up into a pretty healthy business called Networks Group, a Juniper Platinum reseller that was servicing all kind of businesses in the Midwest, from Herman Miller to Motorola and all the others. And we asked him to help represent kind of our idea to his customers as a vehicle for our exploration. That we wanted to test the market to see whether a thesis we had around making two-factor authentication easy for everybody would actually work. A two-factor authentication, the kind of initial product that we ended up building, was a very old product category. It was invented back in the 80s, and a company called RSA was literally the 800-pound, $800 million sort of gorilla in that space who had owned it since 1985, right, when they patented security. And so we were trying to figure out if there was a way to carve out a route and a path, to an underserved kind of opportunity in the market in this kind of smaller segment that would be uncontested, right, by RSA's decades-old channel. And so anyway, so this guy Steve, he was very gracious. He agreed to have us introduced to a number of his, in some cases, some of my old customers. And one of the reasons why we did that versus going directly was because most most folks that you ever talk to about your business, if you know them in some way, professionally or personally, in those early days, are going to tell you the same thing, right? When you ask, hey, this is a good idea, they're like, yeah, it sounds awesome. Like, hey, you should totally do that, right? Or whatever. Right? There's, you get no real, truly valid kind of market feedback around your idea, unless it's kind of arm's length, right, to a customer who actually can express their need in a way that isn't catering to sort of, your charm or good looks or past history. And so, we kind of had, Steve and his business as a buffer, right, to go and explore that with. But that was what's interesting is, once we kind of found those early customers, and all of our first 5 customers anyway, were his. They were Central Ohio Primary Care, a large physician-owned healthcare group in Ohio. We had Sioux Tribe here in Michigan. We had New World Systems, a municipal software business up in, I think, Traverse City, Michigan. These were smaller customers, but ones who quickly entrusted us with a pretty important aspect of their business, which is how to protect all their logins. And so that first customer, Central Ohio Primary Care, we ended up closing within the first 45 days of us actually starting the company. And what it really was selling a bit on a PowerPoint. And we weren't faking it till we made it or anything like that. We were pretty honest with them about, hey, is it our new business? But we've had some successful industry experience before. And if we can kind of prototype something for you, would you buy it? And their problem was they had all these doctors that were floating between multiple clinics or healthcare environments, carrying kind of a keychain of these hardware tokens, right? These little devices that would read off a one-time password every 60 seconds to you, right, to log in with. And it's such a pain, right, for doctors to sort of fumble around with, clinic by clinic. And so we consolidated that to their phone, the device they already had in their pocket. And they agreed that if we could make that work for their access, that they'd pay us, basically half what they're paying to sort of their other vendor for those tokens. And so that's what we did. And we got sort of our first $12,000 check, and we're off to the races. But yeah, that's what that first year was, basically building and then and doing a little bit of selling. And then we stopped selling entirely when we had an outage. Actually, at that first customer, Central Ohio Primary Care is a healthcare organization, and when you can't log in, it's actually a very dangerous thing. So, and we did have an outage. We had an outage, took them out for almost an hour, and at that point, we decided we're going to stop all sales and just focus on how to build a platform that actually was, responsibly stable, secure, all the rest. And so that's what we spent the rest of our first year really doing, just making sure the product was right.
So your friend Steve, the reseller, made a bunch of introductions that ended up leading to your early customers. What was in it for Steve? Why was he helping you?
25 point margin. So, okay. That's not the only reason. Steve is a really good dude. In fact, we have, quite a number of Duo folks are now investors in his new company as he spun out a product as well. And at least one of our very first sales hire, Patrick Garrity, is now a co-founder over with him. So it's all in the family. But partly I think it's just he needed something exciting and interesting to present his customers. If you're a reseller, the problem you've got is your margins are razor thin. You're sort of pushing products from vendors that very often don't listen to you, what you need and what your customers need. And so one of those rare opportunities that he had to really help shape kind of a solution for his customers through us. And but yeah, it was also just a lot of goodwill, and I think that's one thing that's I also, in reflection, really do believe is a strong strategic advantage for us in the Midwest, that people generally here are kinder than necessary. They go out of their way to help each other be successful. And again, that was one of those things where, Steve was not an angel investor. He did not, otherwise participate directly in the building of our business, except that, again, he made these introductions. He helped represent kind of our earliest kind of opportunities. And again, for that, we'll forever be grateful. So.
And a quick note to the founders in the audience, we're going to be hearing from Thompson, Adder, and Comey tomorrow, who built Nice Healthcare largely with the help of resellers. And usually resellers are kind of a lousy use of time for early stage tech companies because they're not willing to take a lot of reputational bet on you. But if you can find a reseller that is willing to see you as a longer term play or a longer term investment and help with either connections or insights in the very early days, that can lead to some very explosive results in the early days. So resellers may not necessarily make great business partners year 1 and year 2, but they will certainly make great advisors and friends year 1 and year 2.
Yeah, and then that was exactly what happened. So, beyond those early, I think 5 deals, that was pretty much the extent of kind of our commercial kind of involvement with Networks Group. But again, they got the ball rolling for us, helping us learn what we needed to know. And then, year 2 was all about finding a path to the market that was actually direct, right? Not through a reseller. And so that's where we did all this sort of very traditional. Now it's funny to think traditional now. Then it was sort of all kind of new, lean startup style, $5 a day kind of ad buys and lots and lots of testing. Spinning up all kinds of landing pages and seeing what we could do to aggregate demand right online and find customers who are looking for alternatives to the existing incumbent solutions that were out there. And so that's what we spent our second year doing, and that actually ended up working fairly well. But yeah, we knew we'd have to pivot because when I was at Barracuda, a company that was again very successful, they were also sort of democratizing security in their own way, taking hardware appliances like firewalls or email gateways and selling them for like a tenth of the price. Instead of a $25,000 Blue Coat box, you could buy a $2,500 Barracuda box. But I wanted to do it without the hardware, and I wanted to do it without that channel. They did it all through channel. And I thought, in the age of SaaS, particularly, watching the rise of companies like Salesforce and stuff, but then also my co-founder, John, doing his PhD literally on delivering security from the cloud. How do you do that architecturally? How do you do it from a governance, compliance, all that kind of stuff? We really had a thesis that we could build a cloud native, we could build the next great SaaS company in security. And so that was really the ambition, and that's what we spent the next year kind of building a go-to-market to enable.
I believe I read that your tagline in the early days was "We suck less." Is that right? which pretty much says a lot about the rest of your industry.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I did. I was, I tried a lot of taglines with my buddy who was an advisor at the time, a brand and marketing advisor who later now is our creative director, Pete Baker. But he, I said, security sucks. Who has time for this? Or we suck less. All that stuff. It's true. Like security is something that nobody wants to deal with. Right? It's a tax on most businesses, and again, it's complicated and something people just generally don't want to think about. It's kind of like buying insurance, but much more complicated. So anyway, yeah, we ended up figuring out how to pivot that in the push to the cloud for many companies, that one of the things that they would need in order to do that successfully were the controls, the visibility, policy, and control they had when those systems were actually on premise. And so that's what we ended up really leaning into, and today was what Duo is known for. So all the green we have and so forth, for a company based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, primarily by Wolverine sort of founders, to have green and white as our corporate colors, sort of Spartan sort of colors, is sort of painful for us. But it represents sort of like green lighting a path right through all the chaos for our customers, and making security something that can be an enabler, right, versus a burden or hurdle. So those are the kind of things that we sort of work to pivot and really finesse in those early days of trying to figure out what we stood for and how we represent that and wear that on our sleeve, because there's so many companies in our space, or over 100 different two-factor authentication vendors. And so, it was kind of the worst idea. Maybe not the worst, but it was going to a super crowded market, thinking you're literally going to build a better mousetrap is typically not what I would advise people to do in building a startup. But everyone's got to do something, I guess.
So let's talk about your product failing. So what have you learned over time what have you learned from when your product goes down or when the customer is not able to use it, like with the healthcare company? Or I assume that's probably not the only time that's happened, when you guys have gotten the phone call where they say something's not right. What have you learned over time about what happens when your software fails your customer, and specifically not necessarily how to react in the moment, but how do you react, or how do you treat the relationship after it's all fixed?
Yeah, so I'll put it this way. I think technology is still a people business, right? At the end of the day, the choice of vendors is not just about the technology that you'll build, but the organization that's behind it and how it operates. And so, we really had a clear focus on not just building the right kind of product, but really building the right kind of company and organization, long term, that could earn the enduring trust, right, of our customers over the long haul. Because that's the other challenge in security, right? Security is one of these industries where, as attacks change and different techniques and so forth evolve, there's almost a new product, right, for every one of them. Protecting against if there's like a foo attack, there's like an anti-foo sort of product, and one of those for every IT product you have to protect. And so we really wanted to do something different and try to help customers get off this hamster wheel of pain, right, of continually having to buy new products and all this. But the way we had to think about that was to establish a different relationship. And so that's where I think the SaaS model really is different. SaaS is not just a sort of technical delivery model for software. It really is a different business model in terms of you are a platform and a provider, but truly a partner to your customers, delivering a core aspect of their business, every day. And then what we do, in protecting those logins or enabling them, making them easier, what we found is, since COVID, we've been in the business of helping other businesses actually stay in business. And, we're able to do that because, again, I think we spent a lot of time thinking about how we really deliver the responsibility, meet the responsibility we have as a vendor to our customers over the long term. And so we haven't had too many of those kinds of outages, right? Since those first days, we actually invested, very significantly into security and reliability and scale and performance and all that. We also try to build a better system by design so that, again, if there is a reason why we might be down, and it may not be our fault, right? For instance, we have customers in Alaska, and you'd be amazed the number of times like something might trawl through, the coast there and dig up, their internet and disconnect them from the lower 48. But when those things happen, we figured out how to design ways, right, failure modes that customers can manage through successfully with us. But more than that, it's make sure you have the partnership with those customers so that you are accessible. They can call you anytime, that you actually understand their business. And for instance, our customers, our entire sales motion and sort of customer engagement model is really built around sort of our shared success with them, right? That they have a positive business outcome they were looking for when they came to us. And when they first do call us and we reach out to them with an ADR, that's what we ask about. So what are you trying to accomplish? And it's not just about buying a specific technical control. It's more about, what part of their business are they can protect or enable. They have a lot, for instance, maybe all these contractors, they need to get into the business safely, or they need to go from 2% to 80% remote work, right? Like the US has gone the last 6 months. And so whatever that is, we capture that, and that flows all the way through our sales process, flows through to our customer success kind of journey as well. And so whenever we have a customer success person follow up, that's exactly what we're tracking. We're not tracking kind of our deployment and adoption and all that kind of thing. We're actually tracking success metrics that they've defined for their business that we help enable, and whatever those may be. and that's what we're continually sort of checking in on and asking about to ensure that they've actually secured the larger value of what they've actually bought us for. And so anyway, it's all to say that I think SaaS is actually sort of a commitment, right, to that kind of partnership with your customers. And if that's your strategy, right, as a business, you end up very quickly having to build a structure to support it that looks very different than most other legacy, anyway, technology vendors.
Cool. So let's talk about that commitment. Take us back to the early days. Let's say you're sitting in front of a potential client, a bank, and they're saying, you know what, Doug, this all sounds great, but here's what we need. We're going to need you to add this and this and this, and then build integration into this and customize this for us. What have been your learnings over the years as to when it makes sense to say yes and when it makes sense to say no to customizing for a one-off customer?
Yeah, we took a hard line on that, actually, Casey. It was one of those things where, we got that. One of the earliest ones we got in those early days was from a very, very large bank who is a customer today. They're a top 5 bank in the US, actually global bank. But they basically said, look, we love the product, Doug, but we're a bank. We have regulators who tell us that our 2 data centers in New York and New Jersey can't be 50 feet closer. We need to have your software in a box, right? Put Duo in a box for us. We'll run it in our data center and we'll be good. And so we did spend some time working on what we called DOPE, the Duo On-Premise Enterprise Appliance. And they really struggled with this notion because this was not why we started the company. But it was $1 million deal. At that point, we'd probably only done 25K deals, kind of tops. And so it's a massive sort of opportunity for us. But it was actually one of our earliest board members, my independent board member, Stratton Sklavos, who was the former CEO of VeriSign. He was on Salesforce's board. He had been on Intuit's board, had left, and actually joined our board. And this is shortly after our Series A. And I remember talking to Stratton about this, and he just stopped me cold and looked at me straight in the eye and said, Doug, don't. He said, the last person that kind of had this sob story for me on having to do something for a customer they didn't want to do in this way was really Mark Benioff. And he's sitting in that same damn chair telling me exactly the same thing. Like, hey, I got a customer, they want to put Salesforce in a box and blah, 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 blah. And he said, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told Mark. He said, don't do it, right? Be on the right side of history. You started this business for a reason. Those customers, the right customers are going to come to you for the vision, the future that you are building, right? To lead them into the future, not hold them into in their past. You don't compromise here, and this is one of those things that was really shocking to us, because at Arbor Networks, I'll be frank, we sort of went every which way, right, to sell customers. We whether British Telecom or AT&T or France Telecom or whatever, we almost had a different product. Bloomberg, in some cases, we really did have a different product for every one of those customers. And so my background, having come from that kind of enterprise kind of world, coming into this sort of SaaS business, I wasn't sure where to draw the line, but Stratton was really helpful there, and he told me and John, the boys, just stay on the right side of history, do what you set out to do. This is why we backed you. I'm not looking for, this kind of low quality revenue. And these were things that, stuck with us for a very long time. But, that kind of pep talk from Stratton helped give us the sort of courage of our convictions to sort of build out. And that's where we did. We turned that customer down and told them, look, appreciate your needs and everything else. And, at some point we do believe that you will probably go cloud for something that you're doing. And for the use cases you have for us, right, enabling these outside contractors and all these other folks into your vendors and consultants into your business at the border of your enterprise, you're reliant on some third party anyway, right? Come back to us, right, when you're ready for that discussion and when you have that need. And so anyway, we there were multiple opportunities like that. There was another big financial company later in the business that was also over $1 million deal that actually was successfully using our product as a cloud service, but not for the right reasons. And when they came to do their final kind of on-site compliance checks with us and all this, and I figured out that, they were looking at us sort of in a very different direction, right? Than we were looking to sort of take our customers and our business, actually turned their deal down. I referred them over to a friend's company, the Twilio, right, to go and service them in terms of low cost kind of SMS kind of service for basic two-factor. And you know, it's very painful for my sales team to sort of hear, but at the same time, they appreciate it because we have to earn it every day, right? As a SaaS vendor, we have to earn our keep every day. And there really is such a thing as low quality revenue, where you're not aligned with your customer around what their future is and what yours, you know, what kind of future you're helping to create for them. And again, unless you really are aligned in that journey, you're not going to get the recurring. I mean, we enjoy, even today, close to like 90%, you know, renewal rates, and you know, really outstanding, best in class. We have net dollar retention, right? The cohort of customers that expand with us, right, from some early sale, you know, is tremendous. And so, but you only get that when you've had that kind of partnership with your customers and what value you're delivering to them and why. So anyway, so that's, yeah. So I guess what I'd say is around customization, the way to think about that for us or for others is, if you're building SaaS, is really through like mass customization. Anything you can do in our product, you can do via an API call, right, programmatically. And so we did build an API first sort of driven platform, and that's enabled kind of everything. And some of our customers like Facebook, they've never even logged into Duo's kind of admin console. They just use all our APIs. But that's I think the much better way to go, and not to wrap yourself too much around the customer's axle, right, on this stuff. You know, you built a product for a reason, and hopefully you find the right customers, right, for that.
So we got a question from Paul in the audience. He says, you were hiring remote back in the day before it was cool. Did that seem risky, or did you get any kind of pushback? Is that true? Were you hiring? Did you have a distributed team in the early days?
A bit, yeah. So, for instance, Carl, the Portland punk and data plumber, you know, he was again, first year of Duo. I'd never met him. I knew him for like 15 years online, but never met him in person. But he was the first guy I think we actually did end up paying real money to. But we never met him. A lot of that comfort came from my prior experience in open source. So before I was a, you know, startup founder and all this, I was a kind of a software communist, if you will, open source hippie, building a lot of free software. So those of you who are technical, if you look at your SSH man page, I'm listed as one of the authors there, with a number of other Ann Arbor folks, right, that spun that out. But my prior experience was actually bringing together groups of volunteer software programmers, right, to work on projects. And so I've always had some comfort doing that. And again, as an old hacker, again, most of my kind of relationships and all this kind of stuff were online from these different groups and so forth. And so I was comfortable with that. And in fact, every company I'd done, including that the consulting business, including Art Networks, Zatu, et cetera, was all built around some kind of form of internet chat. So before there was Slack, there was HipChat. Before there was HipChat, there was IRC. And so every one of the businesses I'd had previously, we were organized around this goofy internet relay chat. Well, not goofy, but venerable internet relay chat that was kind of what I grew up with as a teenager and so forth. So yeah, so I think that, but I don't think these days, even with kind of COVID and all this other thing, I would still highly recommend getting people together. You know, it's harder now physically and so forth, but I do think place matters. I really do, and I think that there really is a very different team dynamic that happens when you have people in one place able to have the casual interactions, right, of kind of water cooler talk or running to each other. You know, our offices in Ann Arbor were sort of designed similarly to things I'd heard Steve Jobs do with Pixar, right? Like putting all the bathrooms and all the conference rooms in one place so that everyone would sort of run into each other, right? Trying to, get to them. Those things actually have had real meaningful impact on our business anyway, of fostering all the random interactions that happen where real creativity and collaboration happens, not just in the scheduled meetings with the agendas and all that we all love to do.
Was there ever a time in the early days that Duo came close to running out of money?
Sure. Yeah, probably after the first year, because by that point I was funding more, and John was again still he was trying to complete some of his PhD at the same time. He was ABD, all but dissertation, and so but he wasn't making any money, and so and my wife's belly was growing, right? Right, the second child, as our savings were shrinking, and there's only so long that was going to be possible, at least without me getting divorced or something. So yeah, three things happened in a funny order in July of 2010. We closed our first round of funding, which was a seed round led by True Ventures, who themselves were a startup at the time. I think they were less than 2 years old. And they came with a very different pitch for us, coming to Michigan, actually. It was interesting. Tell another story, I guess. So we closed that first $1 million round of seed financing. We sold Arbor Networks. So that second company I was part of, the first venture-backed company, right, helped start. But that was a good exit, nearly a $250 million exit. And then we had our second child. Right? So all in that month, and actually had that happen in a different order, or spaced differently, maybe Duo wouldn't exist, right? Because the stresses were pretty real, very real, right? In terms of not having kind of enough money to keep going and all this kind of thing, and again we were picking up a little bit of kind of revenue here and there, but it was coffee money, really, like $12,000 and here or there. It buys a lot of coffee, but to pay for a remote employee, to pay for a designer, all this kind of stuff, it adds up. And so yeah, that first year we became close. You kind of skimmed the treetops, right? You definitely built a plane as you fly it. But yeah, that was I wouldn't say a lucky sort of break for us, but it was one of those things where that was the first and only time that we went out kind of real on the road trying to fundraise, and we were actually unsuccessful. I'd gone out, we'd done the Silicon Valley Roadshow. I remember the best pitch I think I had done was at Andreessen Horowitz, where my laptop had literally ground to a halt in the parking lot as I'm preparing the last touches on it on the deck 5 minutes before we go in. And so I had to go in basically giving just an oral pitch, right, at a whiteboard. But it's actually True Ventures who had heard that we were raising and then agreed to come out to Ann Arbor to meet us. And they gave us kind of an answer. I said, look, we need an answer quickly. And they did, true to their word. 48 hours later, right, we had our term sheet. And so, anyway, some part of it was luck and some part of it was just, I don't know, being really stubborn about sort of getting through as much as we could. But yeah, once we sort of had that, we were off to the races and able to put all the pieces back together and then some.
Who did you turn to for advice when the going got tough?
Yeah, that's a good question. On reflection, that's one of those places where I sort of feel like I did it really the hard way. I failed myself, maybe, and certainly myself and maybe my team as a leader in trying to come up with all these answers or grind through it. I had a buddy who had done a company. Well, he's the closest thing I knew to sort of like a startup kind of founder who had been successful. Ian Rogers, who grew up in Goshen, Indiana, kind of the armpit of America. Sorry to anyone from Goshen, but he used to come up to Ann Arbor to come skateboarding with me, and his girlfriend was in my dorm at Michigan, and he was a single dad when he was like 15 and had a daughter out of wedlock. And anyway, long story short, he went on tour with the Beastie Boys, never looked back, went out to LA, started some companies, which eventually he did Nullsoft, which became sold Winamp. It was bought by AOL. He did a company that was Muse.net, which was bought by Yahoo. So he ran Yahoo Music and Video and all that stuff. And then he did his own company called Topspin Media, which was a Foundry-backed company, but then was tapped by Dr. Dre to go start Beats. So he's the CEO of Beats and sold that for $3 billion to Apple. He's over in Paris now, the chief digital officer for LVMH, the luxury brands. But I remember Ian was one of those early mentors for me that I could reach out to, because he sort of understood me a bit and what I was about, But I remember asking him, like, should I do this thing? I don't know if this is crazy. Like, I could just, this Barracuda thing, get to IPO, right? Lynn's pregnant, like, and he was like, Doug, when faced with two choices in life, do whatever makes for the better story, right? Because that's basically all we got in life, right? And why, you can't fall that far, right? Like Ann Arbor's a pretty cheap place. You got people around you. You can always get another job if you really need to. Do you think you want to do it? And you really feel that passionate about it, that strongly about it, that you go and sort of do this, I remember my wife at the time was, pretty pointed with me. She's like, I'm having the baby. Like, it doesn't mean you need to go and like what is this? Like, you want to have your own baby? Like, what is this about? Like, why would you do this now? Ultimately she's very, very supportive, and, I would not have been able to be, we would not have been successful as a business had Lynn not given me sort of the support to go do this crazy stuff. But, it was Ian that kind of had also given me some courage of my convictions. I go and try to do this thing. And, but yeah, it was mostly moral support, and I think honestly that for a lot of founders, that's probably what you need most. At least that's what I see all the time. Like working out of the tech brewery, it wasn't because, it wasn't just the cheap desk and all this stuff, but it's honestly because we need to be part of a community of fellow travelers that were kind of doing this together so that we could kind of keep each other sane. And there were a bunch of other companies there, including some of my colleagues previously from Arbor Networks who were starting their own companies. And we were sharing kind of tips and tricks, where to get health insurance. Right? Our first health insurance plan was through the Construction Association of Michigan. CAM. I don't know how we did that, but we were we got a really nice healthcare package through them. Anyway, but we were comparing all these notes, but it was really the moral kind of support and just because every day in those maybe the first 3 years of starting a company, as I tell founders that are doing this for the first time, are either going to be the best day or the worst day of your life. So really, literally like that, right? It's this very bipolar kind of experience, and again, I think being part of that community has really helped keep us grounded and ensure that we felt like we didn't have that far to fall, and actually that's really what happened, right? And subsequent years, the companies in the tech brewery, some of them exited, well, some of them failed, but of all the founders that didn't kind of go on to other success in their own companies, they did recombine, right, in others. And again, I think that startup community, right, really is a super important and special thing. What you're doing, Casey, and trying to help foster this, across multiple communities in the Midwest, is really essential because again, it is terrifying, starting a company, even if your wife isn't pregnant, with a child and all this kind of thing. And again, I think that's, there are many, many mentors, right? Success, as I say, many fathers, right? And there are many, many people that helped us along the way. And so I can't even recount all the other folks that are Steve Fuller or again, like that first, deaf admin, Paul Anderson, who took a chance on me, right? Rather than, I was on academic probation for 4 years, my entire college career. But I could have been in much worse trouble had Paul not kind of made a play to kind of help me do something, productive. Right. So again, I just think it really does take a village. And so that's why I say, place matters. And I think the Midwest is a great place, right, to build a business because, neighbors here know how to look out for each other.
There you have it, founders. Midwest is where you belong, to look out for each other. Thank you so much, Doug, for taking us down memory lane. I know this was a long time ago now, but congrats on all your success. And a lot of people don't know that Doug is working now, even though he's still running Duo within Cisco. Like, he's spending a lot of his time and a lot of his money helping Ann Arbor and Michigan startup community get better and stronger. So thanks for all you do, Doug, for the startups in the Midwest. Thank you for spending time with us today. And anyone that wants to can give Doug a shout out on Twitter at Doug Song. For example, if your wife is ready to have a kid and you're freaking out, hit him up for advice. He's been there. He knows exactly how to talk you off the ledge as you're launching your new company. And thanks again, Doug. And everyone, be back here at 9:40 sharp for our next talk. Thanks so much, Doug.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good day, all.